I just want to say beforehand, that was an amazing talk. I'm a much more conversational speaker, so if you excuse me if it doesn't measure up. Just want to set expectations beforehand. My name is Ying. I'm a data scientist at the Department of Commerce, and today I want to talk about just a small question that we face at the Department of Commerce. And I think it applies to everybody here who works in data. And hopefully, I've been reading a lot of Taoism and Confucianism recently, so hopefully posing this question, we'll all find enlightenment at the end of this. But don't chase me out of the room if we don't. So before we get to the actual question, some background, just so you know how we came to this question at the beginning. Like I said, I work at the Department of Commerce. That's our lovely seal. This is actually the first time I actually looked at it in detail, so it's interesting. I'm sure the front end or UI designers can come up with something, some improvements potentially. But for people who don't know, the Department of Commerce is a huge, huge, huge entity. It has 12 agencies within it, and you may know some of them. Census, USPTO, but it also includes places like NIST, which is the national standards, who basically define what is 1 pound for us. It includes NOAA for the weather. It includes all these agencies with very diverse and seemingly different subject matters. They're all unified in one mission, which is to grow the economy. And that's why we issue, as an entity called Department of Commerce, a lot of public data, right? That's our vector towards growing the economy. And so if you were to look at the federal public open data sets available, the complete listing, Department of Commerce is roughly a third of it. It's roughly a little bit more than a third, so rounding down. But it covers a lot, and it's constantly released. We have different release schedules for every kind of data, from daily to monthly to panel to quarter to annual. All of that is on separate schedules. If we were to list all of that, it is mind-boggling. And we collect it in a number of ways. NOAA uses satellites and instruments, right? Census uses a lot of surveys. NIST and BIS do a lot through legal and through standards, right? All that data is important for the economy. And it affects everything we do. Our standards dictate how your phone is made, how your television works, how you organize your business, right? So, although that is important, all of that is important open data. And so it leads to the question I'm posing to everybody today. And that is how to impart better understanding of our data at the Department of Commerce. We asked ourselves this. So, just a little insight. We release this data publicly. And our hope is for people to take this data and grow the economy. But what if they don't know how to use that data? What if they do it wrong? And that's totally a pitfall. But our job is to impart better understanding to them, right? Making it open does not imply making it understandable. So, I think this applies to everybody here who works in data, because in part, all of us are building something off of data, right? We are passing something along, some insight, some product, some final thing from that data, whether it is another version of that data. And so, how do all of us impart better understanding of the data to the person we are giving it to next in line? So I like to think of this as not just a DOC conundrum. Hopefully it is a data conundrum, and all of us can think a little bit about it. I won't promise I have the answer. I have a couple ideas. And just so we can frame it in a little different way, a different perspective, so people can have sort of an idea of what I'm talking about, is how many people here have, just a quick show of hands, have inherited code from somebody else? Awesome. Like, it could have gone two ways. No hands or all hands. I'm glad it went the other way. So this is the only line of code I wrote for this presentation, which is, hopefully you'll forgive me, and it's actually Ron, so. But as you can imagine for yourself, all the code you've inherited, and you see this function, right? And you're like, what does this function do? No idea, no comments, right? If it's not commented, it's not annotated, there's no documentation for how do you begin working on that inherited code base. And so what I'm trying to say is that the data we give is also inherited. In the same way code is inherited, data is inherited. Our open data sets are inherited. Anything you give as a data product is inherited. And so, just to liven up the room, I have a quick quiz for you about public data in Department of Commerce. How many people here have used American Community Survey? Oh, thank God. You never know with these things. Like, I've had presentations where nobody raised their hand. I'm like, okay, let's just go on to the next one then. So I want to ask the people who have used American Community Survey, or for people who haven't. A little background on the American Community Survey. The ACS, short, is the largest survey in the United States. It might be the largest in the planet. I'm not quite sure, because we have a lot of money. It has some 20,000 variables about the American life in that survey. It has 1 year, 3 year, 5 year vintages. It's a massive, massive undertaking. It surveys 3% of the population, roughly, every year. That's a lot of surveys. And so they release erratas when they detect an error, whether in their published data, whether in their data collection, or in any of their processes, right? They have to publicly disclose it. For people who use ACS, or for people who are interested, can anybody venture a guess how many erratas were issued in 2016 so far? 0. I wish it was 0. No. So somewhere between 0 and 150. So the answer is actually 5. There are 5 major erratas issued so far in 2016. And they're pretty major if you go look at them. Some of them include just the wrong number. Some of them include wrong data collection processes. Some include all these things, right? Since I like obscure formats, I put a QR code if people want to get to the website that lists the erratas. But this is just one of those things. This severely impacts your final product, right? If there is an error there and you do not know about it, ignorance does not protect you from your final analysis. You need to know. How do we convey it better? So I've talked about this, I don't know, a couple times, but Veer's Nighttime Lights is, I think, an awesome, cool product. And it's a satellite image of the planet, the nighttime lights on the planet, every day. It's public, it's free. Produced by NOAA for everybody to use, right? I think it's amazing. But I don't know if anybody's ever used it before. See, this one usually no, but okay. I'm still gonna go through it. It's a giant raster. Every day, about 2.7 gigs of the nighttime lights for every pixel on the planet. And so, if I were to ask you, how would you determine if the pixels are actually 0, if there's actually 0 light on the planet? Since nobody's ever worked with the data, I'm just gonna answer, so I'm not gonna wait for an answer. What actually happens is that there are 2 types of zeros on that data set. Ones are actually, yes, for the month, there was no light observed, right? Or for that day. The other is that there was cloud cover for that day, which means we couldn't see what the light underneath it was. And if you didn't know, you would just put the 2 together And that's an important distinction for any product you work on in Veers. Again, I like obscure format. So QR code again, if anybody wants to check out that data set. And last one, survey of income and program participation. Does anybody ever heard of this one? It's SIP for short. Basically, it measures income for the nation. So you might have not have heard of SIP, but you've probably seen it in the news, particularly recently, about the income of our nation, how families are doing, how households are doing. You've seen it probably in reports. I know I have, and sometimes it drives me crazy. Because you would not believe the amount of times I've seen people take SIP panels and not weight them. And so for people who aren't familiar with survey methodology, I'm sorry, I am, so I work a lot with census, so it just comes with the job. If you don't weight it, you're not weighting against the population, you're not making the estimates cohesive and comparable, right? Cross-longitudinal, cross-sectional, doesn't work. You cannot put those numbers by themselves. Just doesn't work. And so again, anybody who wants to check that out, I'm gonna tell you right now, all of these websites, they look pretty bad. So it's typical federal government websites, forgive us. But the information there is important. If you're gonna use this to build a product, it's important. If you're gonna use this to derive an insight, it's important. So again, the question I'm asking is how do we convey the necessary information to use our product, to use the inheritance we give you? And just to liven things up, I have an anecdote about myself and how I sort of understood the data. So the Veers data set I talked about earlier before, we were trying to build, well, I'll just make it I, so the royal we. I was trying to build and tie that sensor data to economic activity, right? And what that would imply is that if we could derive a relationship, we could generate a sensor-built economic indicator, which is huge. All our indicators on the economy are survey-driven, are admin record-driven, which is completely dependent on budget. You can't really stop a satellite once you launch it, which is the best part. So I took that Veers data, I took all the economic indicators, all the demographics, and I counted for the population, I counted for all that stuff, all the typical gamut. And I was like, yes, I know what I'm doing. I'm an adult, I deserve to do this. This is important. What I forgot is that the Earth that we live on is a sphere. And that's important. Why? Because it turns out when you take an image of a sphere, places higher or further from the equator have lower pixel count. And so you're essentially sampling less at higher latitudes. And so that messed my whole analysis up. Simple observation, right? I mean, I'm not a flat earther, so I know the planet is a sphere. But I just forgot. I just assumed that was something that didn't apply to me. So that leads me to this tendency that I think I have, and I don't know if everybody else shares, which is that there's this innate behavior within us to think if we silo ourselves from the data or from the domain, from that information, it protects us, that somehow ignorance is bliss. And you see in these cases, they're not. They can destroy what you've worked so hard for. And so the statement I really want to give today is that sort of real insights and real outcomes can only come when we truly synthesize both the knowledge we have of the data and the mechanics of that data, which I'll leave to much more intelligent people today to talk about. But it doesn't come for free. You can't have one without the other to build something real. Just a little plug on our end at Commerce. So what are we doing about it? We have a couple ideas. I have a couple ideas. The one we've launched so far is well, before that, I think the root of that is that it's a communication problem. It's a communication/education problem. What do I mean by that? The core function is that how do we as the people transmitting that data, providing it, and the people inheriting that data communicate, right? Right now, it's in a weird, badly built website that you have to know about, where we have a number you could call. Like, who calls people, right? Like, so at the heart of it is there a way for us to do that better? Through machines, right? Make it machine readable so that it's automatic. Is there a way to incorporate that into the analysis automatically so that you avoid that pitfall? These are all questions we're asking. One of the solutions we have, this is just plugging my own product, is the data usability project. It has tutorials with actual live code. Again, a QR code, because I like QR codes, if you're interested. But I just want to skip over that. And before I skip over that, we have tutorials on all these things, business dynamics, all that stuff written in Python. There's a live repo. Feel free to check it out. But what I really love to do is pose this question to everybody here who works with data in very diverse ways, and love to hear what you think. And just to reiterate, no, really, I would really love to hear what you think of how to answer this problem. And please contact me if you do. So hopefully a little enlightenment came. If not, we're sort of on our path where the Bodhidharma under the tree, gaining enlightenment. Nobody gets the reference? Good, okay, I'm done. How do I turn this off? We're doing. I feel like a stand-up comic.
What was the most skewed city before and after taking into account the distance from the equator? What really was Richmond before or vice versa?
I remember Detroit looking really weird, in more than the usual way. So, but I mean, that's off the top of my head. I haven't thought about it in a while. So, we are continuing to work on it. So it is a work in progress. But that problem has been overcome. There are obviously others. Questions? Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So we do have teams in all the agencies trying to rebuild those websites, at least in Bootstrap or something, that makes it like a little bit modern. But the core issue, I think, is that it doesn't solve the problem of people knowing where to get that information, right? Is there some way we can include it in the data, or it's part of the data that you can't do something that breaks it? I have no idea. But these are all thoughts we're having. Any questions?
What's the best incognito data?
You mean like? That's funny. We actually have a website called the Most Wanted Data Sets, which is what we think are data sets that are cool that nobody uses. I wish I had put that URL in the presentation right now. But I think off the top of my head, a cool one is DMSP, which is, again, a satellite product. But it has a long history. Those satellites have been going on since, I believe, like 2005. And so you have a long time series of pictures of the planet every month, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah, is there a question over here or something? Yes, so that's actually a really astute observation. Is there like a feedback loop that we're building in, right? Is there like a network we're developing of users of our data? And we're all trying to do that. I mean, like there's obviously a lot of third platform options too, you know, like that have this public data available that are also trying to build that. Our products are sort of separated into two group users core, which is the historical users that this data was congressionally mandated for. So like census is mandated for congressional districts, right? So that's the core user. Everybody else is cake, you know. ACS is a supplement, so that's just part of it. The traditional users do have a feedback mechanism. They're heavily invested, you know, and they constantly are invited. They talk back and everything, but that's through like a personal relationship. Our new users, we do want to build that community. Currently, we do not have that, and that is something we want to work on. If you have thoughts, yeah, please. Last one? Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. So the question was, is there a way to, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, build like sort of a product that is a microservice instead of just a bulk release or an open release? And we do have products like that. RIMS is one, people pay for it on a consistent basis. Our like foreign trade is a subscriber service, actually. People subscribe to that data. And they have a large customer component, like customer service component for that data set. Unfortunately, for the vast majority of public data sets, they are bulk release. And they are not consistent. And part of the reason for that is because they're built towards certain users. Like I mentioned before, the primary user that this data was meant for. And so unfortunately, like for DOE, it's in a zip file, it's probably an Excel file, I'm guessing. And so it's built for like policy people. So they're like, that's the most they're gonna get. You can't give them a JSON, they will freak out. You know, I sent just an anecdote again, I sent a markdown file once to a policy person and they sent back, they couldn't open it. And so I was like, but you're supposed to be in charge of tech policy, you know, but I'm not gonna name names, but I got into a lot of trouble for that one. But yes, you're absolutely right. Like the idea that our value is in a surface is absolutely something we should think about. Unfortunately, a lot of our data has to be free. We can't. And to build that dynamic on basically a congressional budget line is much harder, you know, when we can't charge. So it's something we're thinking about.
With open source, I think.
Yeah, so with open source, definitely, yeah. Yeah, well, there are more questions. I just want to give a plug for my friend, Rebecca, up there, I think. Right, is that you, Rebecca? I love you. Spoilers. But yeah, thank you very much.